Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Friday, June the 21st, 2024. I'm afraid I'm going to be talking about Prince William today because it's his birthday. I think he's going to be 42. Now, I'm not going to be talking about him with great enthusiasm. I started looking at his chart, and at first I was, quite excited to be looking at his chart because it's easy. Everyone knows who William is. In a way, it's a kind of an easy video to talk about him. But then I was feeling a certain sense of uneasiness. What does one actually talk about? And who is William? And, with William, it's always about him and someone else. It's about him and his mother, Princess Diana, or about him and Princess Catherine, and him and his brother, and Harry, and how they've got this rivalry, or him and his father, and how him as the future king. But who is the real William? And I know he has Neptune rising. That doesn't help. So Neptune creates this fog around him. It's as if he's saying, don't come close. I'm not going to tell you anything about me. Here's the ascendant, covered in smoke, fog, confusion. We don't really know who's there. Maybe no one's there. Maybe he's just a role. Reminder. The punk group, the Sex Pistols, were talking about the Queen as suggesting that she's not a human being. Maybe one can say something rather similar about Prince William. Okay, obviously he is a human being, but he may just be a role. William, husband of Princess Catherine. William, Aston Villa supporter. William, helicopter pilot. He just has these various roles. That's who he is. But where is the real William? Then, aside from that, tomorrow we do have a full moon. And possibly the full moon is more interesting than William. I suppose it affects all of us. And yes, it is something that I need to look at. I probably should have looked at it earlier, but I will be looking at it in this video. But before I do that, I want to consider what's happening today from a perspective of the astrology and the I Ching. So here is the chart for today, June the 21st, 2024, set for New York at noon. Moon is in Sagittarius, towards the end of Sagittarius. So this may be a little sad because there isn't much fire going on at the moment. There isn't, going on in this chart, except for the moon. When the moon leaves Sagittarius, there'll be nothing in fire unless you count Chiron and the North Node. Actually, William doesn't have much fire in his chart. So if you're a fire sign, you may be concerned that things might be a bit flat once the moon moves out of Sagittarius. Where is the inspiration? Where is the spark? The moon about to move into Capricorn, very different energy. But still, we might as well make the most of the moon in Sagittarius, getting our energy out. Perhaps, if we can, making the world a better place, remembering that the moon is making a trine to Chiron. Chiron is about healing, I suppose. So perhaps our sudden intervention can make people feel better. It's also the maverick. So with moon trine Chiron, we can do something unexpected that people hadn't planned on us doing, and we might change things. People might not like what we're doing, but it's good to shake things up a little. Now, eventually, the moon does move into Capricorn. So it moves into Capricorn New York time at 8 minutes past 7 this evening. So that would mean that it would move into Capricorn 8 minutes past 4 in the afternoon, and even early, sorry, 8 minutes past 4 in the afternoon if you're on the west coast, like California, British Columbia, for example. And even earlier if you're in Hawaii or Alaska. So if you are in the Americas, this evening may be different. As the moon moves into Capricorn, things may, in one sense, slow down, but you'll then realize that the full moon is upon you, because the full moon happens really early in Capricorn. So the tensions of the full moon this evening, certainly if you're in the Americas, are going to start to make themselves felt. Perhaps the realization that things aren't as simple as you thought, that we have to balance our emotions, our sentimentality perhaps, with cold reality. Even if you are not in the Americas, it cannot be denied, but we do have a build-up to a full moon. This full moon is right upon us, and we're starting to feel the end of something. The moon will not be waxing for much longer. So the waxing side of a lunar cycle, from the new moon to the full moon, tends to be more fortunate. And we are still just about in the waxing side of the cycle. Things are still growing. There's a sense that things are developing. As soon as you get the full moon, the moon is waning. It's the dead cycle. Okay, dead sounds a bit grim. I didn't mean it to sound grim. But that's the changeover. And so for some of us, there might be things we want to get done before the full moon, before the moon moves into a waning cycle. But in a way, maybe it's kind of a bit late for that. And at the same time, astrologically, there have been days that have been rather flat, which have just been a little boring, that there hasn't been much energy around. And in a way, today is that kind of day as well. Things just aren't really moving, aren't really working, and we just might feel, what is the point? When I was talking about William, in a rather sort of downbeat kind of way, maybe that wasn't really about William. It's more about me just responding to the rather downbeat environment astrologically. And the moon in Sagittarius, it's making a square to Saturn and a square to Neptune. I mean, that's a bundle of laughs, isn't it? Moon square Saturn, moon square Neptune. Moon square Saturn is just a feeling that things aren't really moving. Things are a bit stuck. There's moon in Sagittarius, wanting the action. Got lots of ideas. Let's get going. But then moon in Saturn. It squares Saturn. We just hit a bit of a brick wall there. There are people holding us back, and that is a bit difficult, but we shouldn't get too worked up about it. The moon square Saturn is a short-lived aspect. Tomorrow, day after, we'll be in a different place. And the moon doesn't just make a square to Saturn, it makes a square to Neptune. And indeed, the moon is going to be squaring the Saturn-Neptune midpoint. So with the moon making those aspects, there's going to be hesitancy, there may be concern, we may not feel that we really understand what's going on. And so perhaps we need to grin and bear, because it's just the nature of the astrological situation today. There is one bright spot astrologically, and that is a sextile between Mercury and Mars. Sextile is a fortunate aspect. Mercury is in Cancer, Mars is in Taurus. So even if we think that things are just not moving, we can make things happen, perhaps through the power of our own words. Mercury Mars is a verbal pairing. It's about having the energy to say what's on our mind. And if we get angry about something, we can talk about it. And I think in many cases, people are going to be prepared to listen. So there is a bright spot there. So don't worry. Perhaps if things aren't moving, it may be that through your words you can get the show back on the road. Turning to the heliocentric picture, I haven't really looked at what's happening heliocentrically before, so I'm not saying that anything actually is happening heliocentrically. But here we have the picture. Jupiter is still trine Pluto. Okay, it's not exact, but that trine is something that should allow us to work on ourselves. So perhaps what it's saying is, if you think there's nothing going on in the world, that there's nothing that can be done, that other people just aren't there, it shouldn't matter, because certain things are happening which we ourselves can engage with without needing other people's help. So perhaps with Jupiter trine Pluto, we need to be quite self-reliant. Also, the Earth, remember this is a heliocentric chart, the Earth is moving into Capricorn. It's in the first degree of Capricorn by definition, because in a heliocentric chart, when you've got the Sun is in the first degree of Cancer, the Earth by definition will be in the first degree of Capricorn. And the Earth is making a semi-sextile aspect to Pluto, and also a quincunx to Jupiter. So there's Earth semi-sextile Pluto, exactly 30 degrees apart, Earth quincunx Jupiter. And I think that with this Earth aspecting both Jupiter and Pluto, okay, minor aspects, it's true. This Jupiter-Pluto, is in a general principle, is about self-improvement. It's about doing what we can to make things better. And the Earth making a semi-sextile to Pluto and a quincunx to Jupiter is giving us a certain unease about the matter. It's like we know we're supposed to be doing something, that we can make things better, but we just feel we feel a whole load of uneasiness about it. And we're perhaps challenged. And so if you're holding back, you feel that there's nothing you can do to make things better, well, I think you might be wrong on that score. It is going to be a bit difficult. And whatever it is that you're planning on doing to improve yourself, whether it's reading a book, going to the gym, taking exercise, working on your social skills, maybe you've got a resolution that you're going to talk to one new person a day, whatever it is, whatever you feel is important, you're not going to really be in the mood, but at the same time, you're going to know it's important. So do what is necessary, and even if at first things are a bit difficult and uneasy, I would just suggest that you plough on. So that's it from a heliocentric view, and now I'm just going to look at things from a perspective of the 12 signs. So let's switch over to the geocentric positions and change the house system. Yeah, I think this is on the Placidus house system, which is not really what we need. And that is not what we need either. Okay, sorry about this. Let's get to the right house system. Yeah, because we want Aries on the left. Left of the chart, we want 0 degrees Aries. Okay, so these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for today, which is Friday, June the 21st, 2024. Aries, you feel that something needs to happen, and you might be in a little bit of a hurry about it, because maybe you can see that opportunities are not going to last forever. If you don't act now, you might miss your chance. And I think you'd be correct in that intuition. The moon, remember, is in late Sagittarius. It is going to move into Capricorn pretty soon, and it may actually move into Capricorn as early as this evening if you're in the Americas, or even late this afternoon. So what is it that you're trying to sort out? And before the moon moves into Capricorn, when it is in late Sagittarius, it's quite an inspired part of the sky for the moon to be in. The moon is on the galactic center. So the galactic center is at around 26, 27 Sagittarius. And so the galactic center can give you access to higher knowledge, cosmic knowledge, what's happening out there in the universe. So if you stay still, Aries, you can be gently inspired, and you can look beyond all the sort of everyday infighting and concerns and worries that people have, and see the picture, which is the true picture, the bigger picture, much bigger picture. And the moon, while it is moving through Sagittarius, is making a trine to Chiron. And remember, Chiron is in Aries, it's in your sign. So with moon trine Chiron, I think that there's something you can do which is different, which defies other people's expectations. And you just do it. It's not like having a big conflict. You think that if you do something, other people are going to complain about it. I mean, they may or may not complain about it. It doesn't really matter. If it's something you want to do and it's not dangerous and it's legal, then just go and do it. Some people might complain, but I think that other people may actually feel that you're helping. So in fact, by being an individual, a true individual, you are in your own way making the world a better place. So it's not just an act of impulsive selfishness on your part. Though I think that many Arians may have sort of stronger feelings than usual, and you may feel that some of your fears and concerns today may be holding you up. You'd like to do things. You know what you're supposed to be doing, but something's just saying, no, don't do it. And I think you have to work out what's going on. If you don't talk about your fears, you don't articulate them, or you don't research your fears, you just hang on to them, they will, for sure, they will hold you up. And you may actually end up feeling quite frustrated. So you do need to actively engage with whatever those fears are, and you might then realize that actually some of these fears are largely a figment of your imagination. And if you can push through these fears, then I think that you may see a very different world. And in terms of your social life, I think that things could actually be quite good if you have the right attitude. I think that you have a chance to meet people who are optimistic, who are on your wavelength, And I suppose this goes back to some of your concerns. If you've got concerns that aren't discussed, those concerns are just going to remain as concerns. But if you discuss your concerns with others, then you might actually find that you're not alone. You and someone else might have the same concern, and when you talk to someone with the same concern, then you might find ways of dealing with it, and it's just going to feel very reassuring to know that you and another person see the world in the same way. And you'll perhaps realize then that you're not alone, that it just wasn't just your imagination, and it will actually be quite empowering, Aries, to know that you are not alone. Now, as far as the moon moving into Capricorn, it is not an issue if you are not in the Americas, but I do understand that a lot of people watching this are in the Americas, and late in the day, the moon does change sign. So with the moon moving into Capricorn, it is a change of energy. For one thing, Capricorn, it's the full moon. You're feeling the full moon, and I suppose late afternoon, this evening in the Americas, the full moon is upon you. And you might see the truth of the matter, but you might also see that something needs to be done. And I don't know what you're doing this evening and if you're in the Americas, but it may be that you feel you need to do something to establish who you are and what you want, and you may be motivated not by the moon in Sagittarius, because the moon won't be in Sagittarius anymore, but you may be motivated by the moon in Capricorn, and moon in Capricorn can be quite a sort of materialistic, even a bit selfish energy. So if you feel this evening, if you're an American Aries, you might just feel something's not right, something has to be done, some security issue, maybe relating to money, needs to be dealt with, and the sooner the better. And that's it, Aries. I don't think it's a desperately exciting day, but I think that that you need to be yourself, and if something's important today, you mustn't hold back. Taurus, it's perhaps nice that the moon is about to leave Sagittarius. You know, moon in Sagittarius is not the greatest place for it to be from a Taurean perspective. I think over the last day or two, Taurus, there's been a fair amount of introspection. You've maybe realized that things are perhaps a little more complicated than you'd hoped, and because things were complicated, there was a lot of thinking had to be done, and you had to and feeling as well, and you had to get to the bottom of things, and it wasn't always easy, and you didn't perhaps feel that you got much support. And I suppose today you're still feeling all of this, especially as the moon is making a square to Saturn. You know, with this moon square Saturn, you perhaps feel a little bit alone in the sense of not being able to really discuss the things that you want to talk about, and you feel that you feel they're important, but you just don't feel that other people are on your wavelength, and your social life may be a little bit of a disappointment. Your social life and your friends and who you associate with, I think, have been important for a long time. Ever since Saturn went into Pisces, which would have been, I think, March of last year. And now with the moon square Saturn, it's hitting you all the more. And the moon isn't just square Saturn, it's square Neptune. So if you try to engage with other people today, particularly friends, associates, not necessarily partners, close one-to-one relationships, more engaging with the group, it may be a somewhat unsatisfactory experience, and you may just get a sense that people don't really know what they're doing. And you might actually reach a conclusion that you need to sort things out on your own. And I think that would potentially be a good conclusion. With the moon in Sagittarius, from a Taurian view, it's quite self-reliant. It should be self-reliant. So that is probably the right approach, not to feel obliged to tell people what's on your mind. You can probably sort things out on your own. Now, if there's something that you need to say, then I think you can say it quite effectively. I mean, after all, Venus is on the Sun-Mercury midpoint, and I think that is actually quite fortunate. Venus is today around 5 Cancer, so the Sun is at 0 Cancer, 1 Cancer, Mercury is at 9 Cancer. So Venus is right between the Sun and Mercury, and Sun and Mercury is about expressing who one is, your true self. And so if it is really important, Taurus, I think that you are actually able to communicate in really quite a powerful way. And people will listen to you. I don't think you're going to necessarily want to communicate. I think you might feel that you've just got better things to do, or people are not going to listen. But if you make a special effort, it's not about the words that matter. It's about preparation and about using your feelings and getting the timing right. Yeah, timing is important. You have something to say, but then you've got to choose the right time. You can't say what's on your mind when other people are busy or distracted. You've got to get that moment 100% right. The right 10-second interval might be really crucial. So get your timing right and say what's on your mind. Tell people who you are and what you want, and I think that you will get a ready audience, especially as Mercury is sextile Mars. So Mars, remember, is in Taurus. It's in your sign. So with Mercury sextile Mars, that provides further evidence that you're able to really say what's on your mind and your message can hit home. So don't give up on today. It might feel that there's nothing you can do, that everything has to be done on your own, that other people are just not sympathetic, or they're sort of on cloud nine, worrying about their own petty interest. But no, that's not true. If you get the timing right, then I think that you can get people to really listen to you. Gemini, you are still in a situation where you have to consider other people. It's not always what Gemini wants to do. I mean, Geminis like variety. They don't want to have to worry too much what other people are thinking and feeling. And so having to just stop and take into account someone else is just not really what you want to do. But I think today it might be necessary. The moon is still in Sagittarius. Remember, Sagittarius is Gemini's opposite sign. So the moon is still in Sagittarius, and the moon is square Saturn, and it's square Neptune. And so other people do matter, and other people can be a problem. And actually, you can be a problem to other people as well. So it kind of works both ways. So there is, I think, a rather uneasy connection between yourself and others. You kind of know that people matter, but at the same time, you know that people can hold you back. And you're just concerned also that your ambitions are being slowed down by other people's responses and reactions. And you may get annoyed, actually, by other people's sense of humour. You know, I know Geminis are supposed to be easygoing people with a good sense of humour, but the wrong sense of humour, the wrong comment, people saying something, people trying to be funny, is not going to amuse you. You won't give people, 10 out of 10 for trying when in terms of the humour stakes. You're just not interested, and in fact, you just want everything to be straightforward, and you want, perhaps in some ways, you just want people to shut up. But I don't think that today people are going to shut up, and I suppose, Gemini, you've just got to try to be tolerant, and also you're kind of aware of the difficulties that people have, and almost the histories and the past that certain people have. I think that you, of all people today, are aware that, under the surface, things are not quite as they should be, and you're very keen to notice things that are deeply wrong. I mean, it's not just me, talking about William and suggesting that he's, I'm a Gemini, by the way, of course. I've got my sun in Gemini. It's not just me thinking there's something wrong there with William. It's just a lot of other people. But it's not just William. It's about everyone. Everyone has got their pasts, and I think that you're going to be aware of those pasts. And also, Gemini, you probably need to watch out about some of the people you deal with, new people. If someone new comes into your life today, I do think that you need to be very, very suspicious, because certain people may not be as they seem, and they may have agendas and as well as pasts which may be rather disturbing, and which you might not want to have anything to do with. So perhaps, Gemini, you should consider not making new connections today, or at least being very wary, because nothing is quite as it seems. And matters are not helped by the fact that the moon, which is moving through Sagittarius, which is your opposite sign, the moon is making a square to Neptune. So with moon making a square to Neptune, that really is a time when you could be attracted to people who are perhaps up to no good, could be deceptive, who could lead you astray. So that is more reason, I think, for you to be really very careful. Now, if you're in the Americas this evening, there is a change, or late afternoon. The moon moves out of Sagittarius, and short term, I think it could be a bit of a relief for the moon to be out of Sagittarius. You might just realize that people aren't quite so important, but you can be more independent, and that you can start to think things through in your own way without being disturbed. Though this evening you might also find that financial issues start to crop up. Again, this is really if you're in the Americas, and it's because the moon is going to be in Capricorn. It's going to be opposition the sun in Cancer. That is the full moon across a financial axis of your chart. So that's coming up, and so perhaps as you move into the weekend, Gemini, regardless of where you are, you might start to realize things about money, and you might actually see the truth about money, and that might require you to take some action. Cancer. The moon is in late Sagittarius, and that says a lot about who you are at the moment. I think that with the moon in Sagittarius, you are quite fiery in your own way, but you're very much making connections in terms of what needs to be done. You can see the connections. You can see what's missing. You can see where the holes are, where the gaps are. And Cancer, I think you're going to be very keen to sort that matter out. But at the same time, the moon is making a square to Saturn, and that square to Saturn could be a bit of an issue, especially if you're a Cancer in, Australia or New Zealand. Something is just weighing on you, and perhaps you're kind of annoyed that you're having to do stuff that other people aren't doing, and you've got this annoying sense of obligation. It's all down to you, and that might make you feel a bit negative. And when the moon, having made that square to Saturn, moves on to making a square to Neptune. So that means that the moon at some stage is going to be square the Saturn-Neptune midpoint. And, regardless of where you are, there is going to be a feeling of moon on the Saturn-Neptune midpoint today. So Saturn-Neptune together, they can be about fear and hesitancy, wondering what's going to happen next. Is it safe? What happens if I do this? Will it go wrong? So a lot of questions there. And as a Cancerian, you actually have a keen sense for your own security, and you're not going to want to take risks. And with this moon aspecting the Saturn-Neptune midpoint, you may decide to hold back. And it could be the right thing to do, because maybe the last thing you want is chaos and uncertainty. You've spent a long time trying to get things organized, to get things exactly how you like, how you want them. And what you don't want to do is just spoil everything in one moment of carelessness, or perhaps allow other people to spoil things. You give people a chance, you let people into your life, and then things could go wrong. And with this moon square Saturn, it does make relationships a little bit uneasy. Okay, that's especially the case if you're in East Asia or Australia or New Zealand. But still, moon is in Sagittarius, Saturn is in Pisces. There is a square relationship between those two planets. And so with that moon square Saturn, you and other people are not entirely on the right wavelength. And matters are not helped by the fact that the moon is also square Neptune. And I think you do need to accept that. And you need to work out what the best response is. Moon square Saturn could be about someone holding you up, someone stopping you doing what you want to do. Now, it may be a good thing that you're being stopped from doing what you want to do. Maybe you've got plans and ideas that are just unrealistic and are immature. They're going to cause damage, and maybe someone's being sensible and they're saying no. In which case, that's good. Accept their advice and don't complain about it. Though it might be, but you're dealing with someone who is just being completely unhelpful, is maybe self-obsessed, almost to the point of being narcissistic, and they're only interested in you. They're not interested in what you want to do, and you're just being ground to a standstill for absolutely no reason. Well, in that case, you've got to act accordingly. If someone is just making difficulties for you for no good reason, then it might be a good idea to stand up for yourself. And you also need to bear in mind that we're moving into a full moon. And this full moon, okay, it's exact tomorrow, but this evening, if you're in the Americas, you are feeling this full moon by the end of the day, because the moon will change sign. It will move from Sagittarius to Capricorn, and straight away it will be making an opposition to the sun. By the way, I should just tell you exactly when this full moon is. I should have sort of mentioned it, but I keep talking about this full moon. So this full moon is on Saturday at 8 minutes past 2 in the morning, London time. So that means that, in fact, if you're in the Americas, the full moon is actually today. So the full moon this evening, it's going to affect you. And American Cancerians may just have a strong sense this evening of what the truth is, and also who they can trust and who they cannot trust. And you're a sensitive Cancerian. You pick up on these things. Now, just because you're getting information doesn't mean you're going to act on this information. Now, I will be talking about this full moon in greater detail later in this video, but I think I just had to point it out. Cancerians really are impacted by the full moon, probably more than any other sign. So full moon is coming up, and this full moon, as I will be discussing, is square Neptune, and so this full moon could be a little bit treacherous, and it's going to be very important that you hold to what you believe in and you don't let other people try to mess you around. But you should be able to see the truth of the matter. Certainly this evening, if you're in the Americas, or start seeing the truth of the matter this evening. If you're not in the Americas, well, it'll be more, tomorrow, I suppose. But yeah, the full moon is on you, and full moons are important for Cancerians, so do prepare for that full moon. And don't make assumptions. You might think that you've understood someone and that you really know what makes them tick. Maybe you haven't. And over the next day or two, you can really start to see the truth of the matter. Leo. I think, Leo, you're a bit concerned about the world around you. And it just might feel at the moment that there are not so many opportunities as there used to be. And I'm thinking particularly in terms of other people. When you look around you at other people, how they're behaving, how they're responding to you, you may feel a certain sense of disappointment. You had high expectations, and I think you feel that these expectations are not really being supported. And I think it could be just a moment of truth. You can't expect a great deal from other people at the moment. They have got their own world, they've got their own way of looking at things, and they're not prepared to drop everything and do things your way. They're not able to. So, if possible, Leo, try to be as self-reliant as possible. Be as self-reliant as you can. You don't need outside support and praise. It's absolutely not necessary, especially with the moon in Sagittarius. Okay, the moon has been in Sagittarius for a couple of days. It is going to leave Sagittarius, but while the moon is in Sagittarius, then you are able to tune into who you are, especially as the moon is fairly close to the galactic center. So the galactic center is supposedly this point which is the center of the galaxy, and you can give it a degree, which is sort of 26, 27, 26, 27 Sagittarius. And with the moon here, you get a sense of who you are and what you're supposed to be doing for yourself. Now, you can only get a strong sense of who you are if you have a certain independence. You've got to be doing things your way, making up your own mind, not spending all your time trying to do things other people's way. Well, yeah, if you want to become part of a collective, part of a group, following other people's orders, yeah, then you're never going to get any sense of who you are. But today, that sense of selfhood should be really powerful, and you have to be strong. You have to resist external pressure and also resist your own fears. It is absolutely terrifying, or at least it can be terrifying, doing things our own way, without reference to other people, without reference to norms, without reference to the accepted way of being, but just doing it our way. There are all sorts of fears that come up. Am I doing the right thing? What if I mess up? What if things go wrong? What if I get criticized? All of these issues are there, but if you can just put these issues to one side, I think that you can really gain your freedom and also gain some self-respect. So I think that is positive. And I would also say there may be a certain amount of hurry. So if there's something you're trying to finish off, which is just really important to you, it's not about other people, it's about you, something you want to do, something where you want to give yourself a sense of accomplishment, then try and get it sorted out today, as early as possible. Because the moon, yes, it's in Sagittarius, it's a fire sign. The moon is not going to stay in Sagittarius forever. It leaves Sagittarius. If you're in Hawaii or Alaska, it could be, I don't know, I'm not very good on Alaskan and Hawaiian time zones, but if you're in Hawaii or Alaska, sort of mid-afternoon, it's gone. Moon has moved into Capricorn. But if you're in Europe, it's not such a big deal. You've got all day. But still, Moon goes into Capricorn tomorrow or today, wherever you are, and that will create a change. And the moon will be out of a fire sign. And Leo, you are a fire sign, and you benefit by having the moon in Sagittarius, because there's nothing else in a fire sign, unless you count Chiron and a north node. So while you've got the spark, while you've got the energy, then make it happen, and just don't leave it too long. Now, late in the day, if you're in the Americas, moon is out of Sagittarius, moon is in Capricorn. You've got a full moon coming up. In fact, there is a full moon this evening in the Americas. And, with that full moon, it's something completely different. And, this evening in the Americas is not just about you or about what you can do in a sort of creative sense. It's about making sure that everything is in order. And many American Capricorns might have a revelation about how things should be organized and how you should be organizing your own life and well-being. It just may occur to you that some things are actually a bit of a mess, and when things are a mess, your own ability to make things happen is restricted, and in fact it might also have an impact on your health. I mean, I suppose it can be literal. I suppose if you're, for example, if your domestic organization is all over the place, things aren't cleaned regularly, there can be dust. This place, this room I'm in, you probably can't see the dust, but it is covered in dust. And dust can, is something that may have an impact. It can damage your health. So it's those kind of things might hit you later in the day. You might be aware of dust that you've never seen before. It can be there, or cobwebs. It's just always been there, but you've never noticed it, and now you notice it. So that could be what's happening this evening in the Americas with the full moon. Now, if you're not in the Americas, don't worry. You'll see the full moon tomorrow. So you can't escape the full moon wherever you are. And that's it, Leo. I'd kind of like to be a bit more positive for you, but I think the underlying message today, Leo, is that you've got to be as self-reliant as possible, and you've got to really respect who you are and not allow yourself to be undermined by other people's negativity. Virgo. Virgos are in a period, a phase when they are perhaps a little more isolated and insular than usual. I mean, this comes with the territory of Moon being in Sagittarius. Yes, I know that Moon in Sagittarius has a reputation for being optimistic and happy and always looking to expand its horizons. But Virgo sees the Moon in Sagittarius energy perhaps in a different way. It's a little bit too much. And so when you've got all this Moon in Sagittarius stuff going on for Virgo, it may actually just feel like overstimulation. There's just so much going on that you perhaps want to retreat from things a little. And that's okay. That's the way it should be. But the moon is not going to be in Sagittarius for much longer. If you're an American Virgo, then later in the day, the moon will move into Capricorn. And I think you will benefit from the moon in Capricorn, provided you handle things correctly. But while the moon is moving through Sagittarius, it is aspecting Saturn. And it's aspecting Neptune. So we've got Moon square Saturn, we've got Moon square Neptune. So with Moon square Saturn, it may be a day when you feel that you're being either held back or that there are just annoying influences. You want things done your way. You really value your own space, and just other people are just getting in your way, trying to tell you what to do. The outside world just cannot be entirely ignored, and this may be irritating. And matters aren't helped by the fact that the moon, having made the square to Saturn, makes a square to Neptune, and then the moon is on the Saturn-Neptune midpoint. And so this could just be annoying for you. And the question is, what do you do? Now, one approach might be just to shut things down, just to not engage with other people unless it's really important. I think that would be a fair approach, just for today. Obviously, if something is important, there's got to be always the opportunity for people to get in touch with you. But just make sure you sort of filter the phone calls. If there's someone you don't want to talk to, then you probably don't have to talk to them. And another issue in terms of other people and why you should be wary of them is that some people are actually quite capable of undermining your confidence, and they can make you concerned about things. You know, life is complicated enough for all of us without having to deal with irrelevant concerns and worries. So having someone dumping their worries on you is probably not what you want. It's just not going to be. It's just not going to be very helpful. And you also have to consider who people are. Ask yourself. Look at all the people around you. Do you really know anything about them? Have you bothered to listen to them, to understand their life histories, their biographies, what they've been doing in the past, what their real motivations are? Have you been asking yourself these questions? I think these questions are actually quite important, because there may be just some people who really are hiding things. You have a sense, actually, I think, that they're hiding things, but you can't quite put your finger on it. And really, if you feel that someone is untrustworthy, it's going to mess you around, then I would trust your instincts. I'm not saying you're going to be necessarily right, but do trust your instincts. Or at least don't give anyone the benefit of the doubt. Now, if you're an American Virgo, then this evening the moon does change sign. In fact, the moon could change sign in the afternoon, will change sign in the afternoon if you're sort of on the west coast or in Alaska or Hawaii. And so that sign change is going to be, I think, a bit of a mixed blessing. I think it will be good that the moon is actually out of Sagittarius into Capricorn, because with the moon moving into Capricorn, I think that you're going to have a greater sense of who you are and what you want and what makes you special. But with the moon moving into Capricorn, you also have a full moon situation. And so with this full moon, you may realize that there are people and situations that have to be dealt with. Maybe over the last few days, you've been able to ignore certain people, as I've suggested, and I've even suggested it might have been a good thing. But now, with the moon moving into Capricorn, there may be certain people that have to be confronted. It could be friends or associates. I don't think it's really partners or one-to-one, it's not really a one-to-one relationship kind of thing. It's more about friends and associates. Just some people have to be confronted, or perhaps you'll have a realization that you need to maybe pare down your social links. Maybe just some people just are not really useful anymore, and it's perhaps time to move on. But I'll be talking a lot more about the full moon. I wouldn't worry too much about it right now. And yeah, later in the video, I'll be talking specifically about the full moon and getting into the details about what this full moon actually means. Libra, don't doubt yourself. You are in a good position. Might not feel like it, but I think you are in a good position. And most importantly, Libra, you really know how to express yourself. If there's something you want to say, now is the time to say it. I think that people will listen to you, and you're going to be able to bring out the full power of your personality and your self. And the reason for this is it relates to the position of Venus, and of course Venus is your ruler. So Venus is at 5 Cancer, and it is on the Sun-Mercury midpoint. In fact, we've got a conjunction going on at the moment between Sun, Venus and Mercury in Cancer. And right now, with these 3 planets, Venus is halfway between the Sun and Mercury. So with Venus on the Sun-Mercury midpoint, That's you expressing yourself. Sun is about your selfhood. Mercury is about the ability to communicate. Venus is you. You communicating who you are, communicating your fundamental selfhood. And I do really think that people are going to be listening, especially as the moon is in Sagittarius, or at least for much of a day, depending on where you are. If you're in the Americas, the moon does leave Sagittarius this afternoon or this evening. But really, you shouldn't really hold back. And you should not be worried about how people are going to respond to you. They're going to respond well to you, I think, in most cases. And this is especially the case if you are in an environment where there are issues of hierarchy. Who is in control? Who is not in control? I mean, I suppose one thinks about the working environment, but it could also be your home environment where there is a hierarchy. Wherever there's a hierarchy, one person is supposed to be above another person. Wherever you've got that situation, you're going to be particularly effective. Now, that might be that you, as someone who is at the top of a hierarchy, can communicate your demands, needs, desires, and those below you are going to listen. If you are lower down in the hierarchy, then don't be afraid. You speaking from a position of, I suppose, truth and sincerity are going to get listened to even by people who are above you, your superiors. I don't know, I mean, it's stupid to talk about superiors, but I suppose every hierarchy has superiors. That's the way it is. But people who are supposedly above you are going to listen to you and are going to respect you. And in fact, by saying what's on your mind in a sort of honest and sincere, but respectful way as well, if you're honest, sincere, and respectful, then not only will you be listened to, but I think you're going to be able to better establish yourself within the hierarchy and perhaps in some ways move up the hierarchy, simply because you are getting more respect. Though Libra, you do have to do things properly. I think ideally, in terms of whatever you do today, make sure that you are properly prepared. Spontaneity is good. There's nothing wrong with spontaneity. Moon is in Sagittarius. Moon has a reputation for being very spontaneous in Sagittarius. But don't be too spontaneous. You don't have to be spontaneous. A little bit of preparation could make all the difference. So if there's something you want to say or do or announce, or you want to ask questions, just think it through a little. You don't have to spend much time on it. Just 5 minutes of preparation can make all the difference. Because if you are properly prepared and if you are sure of the facts, you can't be knocked. People might question what you're saying. They might try to undermine you, but it doesn't matter because you've done your preparation, you are confident, and you're going to win through. Now, the moon is at the moment in late Sagittarius, and it does actually change sign if you're in the Americas. Late afternoon, this evening, depending on whereabouts in the Americas, the moon will move from Sagittarius into Capricorn. And that is an important change. It means that, you've got a full moon on your hands, because there is, in the Americas, a full moon this evening. And, this full moon is across an important axis of your chart. You've got you are a cardinal sign, Libra, and so you've got the moon in Capricorn, making an opposition to the Sun in Cancer. That is cardinal. And this full moon, I think, actually relates back to what I was talking about with hierarchies and where you stand in various hierarchies, whether it's at home, whether it's at work. It all starts to become clear. And if there's anything wrong, if anyone is misusing their power, it's going to be obvious to you. If someone is in the wrong position, if someone should not be respected, it will become clear to you. You will see it all with this full moon. Of course, just because you see it doesn't mean anything happens. You have access to the information with this full moon. Now, if you're not in the Americas, it doesn't really matter, because this full moon is going to happen tomorrow. This full moon, I think London time, happens at around 2 o'clock in the morning on Saturday. So it does to an extent depend where you are, but still we're at a full moon time, and so get ready wherever you are to see things in a new way and to see power in a new way. To see who has the power, who's using their power properly, who is misusing their power. And once you have an awareness of how power is being used, then you will be in a position to make changes. And you could make quite dramatic changes if you want to. I understand that Librans don't like to cause ripples. They don't like to upset the apple cart, but not always. I mean, some Librans are strong. Vladimir Putin's a Libran. Margaret Thatcher was a Libran. So, just because you're a Libran doesn't mean you have to always take into account what other people say, or indeed, you don't even have to take into account other people's positions in the hierarchy. Sometimes people don't deserve their positions in the hierarchy, and so in that sense, they might have to be brought down a peg or two, and that may be down to you. So there are a few complications here, Libra, but fundamentally, you are in a strong position, especially with the fact that Venus is on the Sun-Mercury midpoint. Don't hold back. You've got something to say, and people need to listen to what you've got to say. Scorpio, you can be quite positive and constructive if you want to be. You don't have to be, but bear in mind that right now there are people out there who are feeling a little bit sorry for themselves, and they actually also feel quite unmotivated. And Scorpio, you might be the person to get things moving. Now, that might not be something that you feel immediately that you want to get involved with. You may just want to just do things your own way, just run things according to your own particular Scorpio view of the world, which can be quite introspective. But if you make the effort, then I think that you can get people to listen to you, and you can get people to listen to your particular view of the world. And your view of the world right now may actually be quite optimistic. You might not feel that it's optimistic. You might feel that you're being rather negative until you actually start speaking. And when you start speaking, when you start explaining yourself and what you want, you may actually be surprised by your own words, because your own words may be very positive and even uplifting. Though, do take the time to consider what other people are saying. Other people have got a lot to say, and they're ready to reveal their own priorities, and you need to give them a chance, Because if you understand other people's priorities, then you're going to be in a better position to take successful action, because you can't do things if other people resist. If you do things that is completely counter to what other people want, then you're not going to be able to get anything done. So that is a good reason why there needs to be a lot of discussion and listening to what other people are saying, and then you get a chance to say, and then you get a chance to speak, and then things can really move. And you're helped by the fact that Mercury is sextile Mars. So Mars is your ruler. Mercury is, of course, the planet of communication. So with Mercury sextile Mars, you're able to really communicate with incredible power. And once you get into your stride, people really are going to listen to you. And, whatever you're doing, Scorpio, you'd always need to consider that things could be better. That things could be better in terms of awareness and knowledge. Don't assume that you or anyone else has all the answers or has complete knowledge, because you do not have complete knowledge. And I say that in a positive sense. I'm saying that there are new things to be discovered, and today can be a day of discovery. Things are just waiting to be discovered, and all it requires on your part is just a bit of open-mindedness. Sagittarius. The moon is in late Sagittarius, getting ready to leave the sign and move into Capricorn. And the moon in Sagittarius, it makes square aspects to Saturn and Neptune. So the question is, how do you deal with these square aspects? Now, these aspects that the moon makes to Saturn and Neptune may relate to things that you are very familiar with. And I suppose that might relate to, for example, your home and your family. And the Sagittarians might find with this moon square Saturn that family members are less than useful. They might hold you up. That's especially the case if you are in East Asia, Australia, or New Zealand. But I think all of us, regardless of where we are going to feel that moon square Saturn. And it's about family members just perhaps raising issues, making complaints, making demands. Sagittarius enjoys its freedom in a general sense. And if you've got family members telling you what you should be doing, what you should not be doing, it just grinds you to a halt. And also you've got the moon square Neptune. And I think that moon square Neptune is more general. It's about everyone, wherever we are, not just about being in Australia or New Zealand. I think all of us, to an extent, are going to feel this moon square Neptune. And that moon square Neptune may just be a certain fear about our fundamental grounding. And of course, I'm talking specifically about Sagittarius here. So you might be concerned that if you move forward too quickly, that you might lose touch with your grounding, maybe with your family as well, but you just might lose touch and you might sort of float away, fly away. And that's obviously not something you want to do. And in general, this just could mean that your fears are perhaps your worst enemies. You feel uncertain, and when you're feeling uncertain, things just don't happen, because if you're uncertain, you stop moving. So that might actually be a good thing. I mean, if you are unsure about the territory in which you're moving into, then it sounds like a good idea to halt. On the other hand, some of your uncertainties may be figments of your imagination. You are perhaps going to be creating unreasonable fears. Now, Sagittarians are not supposed to be people that fall for unreasonable fears, but some of these fears could be unrealistic or unreasonable, as I've just said, unreasonable fears. And it might all be a bit of a shame. You know, you were ready to do something and you had your chance, but you stop because you have last-minute doubts. So there may be a question, Sagittarius, about how you deal with last-minute doubts. You perhaps get the information you need. Perhaps you need reassurance. So the question is, where do you find reassurance? And it may be that people you know very well, like members of your family, are not the people you need to ask for reassurance. Instead, you should be considering perhaps people who you don't know so well, who are more objective. So getting some objective advice about what is possible and what is not possible might not be a bad idea. Capricorn. There is a full moon coming up, and it's a Capricorn full moon. And this full moon is could be today, could be tomorrow. If you're in the Americas, the full moon is today, it's this evening, or could even be late this afternoon if you're on the West Coast or Hawaii or Alaska. So the Capricorn full moon, it tends to happen once a year, and it is a moment where you have to consider your various relationships, not just with individuals, but with society at large, and it's all becoming rather clear. Even if you're not in the Americas, you can still feel the full moon coming up. Okay, you might not get the full blast of a full moon until tomorrow, but it's still coming up. It's still becoming stronger as the day progresses. So do try to be sensitive. Try to listen to what the full moon is telling you. But the truth is starting to make itself felt, and perhaps you are starting to feel the truth about certain other people, and especially with this particular full moon, because this particular full moon, it's around the time of the summer solstice, so it gets extra power. This full moon, it's a solstice full moon, and I'll be talking about that later in the video. But being a solstice full moon, you perhaps have to accept that some things, some people that you'd been taking for granted just aren't really what they were. They're not as useful as you thought they were. Yeah, that means certain people, you'd been with them for a long time and they'd always been there, but what impact are they having on you? Maybe they're not having a particularly fortunate impact. And just before the full moon, the moon, because the moon is in Sagittarius for most of the day, the moon in Sagittarius is making a square to Saturn, and it's making a square to Neptune. And these are the events, just before the full moon. So just before the full moon, you're going to have, I think, some thoughts about how you're being treated, which may relate to particular events happening today, or it may be just memories of events happening today. So you start to realize how you're being treated. And once that realization happens, it becomes clear that there's only one course of action. Now, when I say how you're being treated, I'm not just talking about bad treatment, I'm talking about good treatment, maybe. Some people are treating you well, some people are treating you badly. And that's the way it's always been. And with this full moon, it is probably time to take action and to reconfigure things and make sure that you are treated well universally, and that people that treat you badly, and indeed situations that treat you badly, are avoided in the future. Aquarius, you are coming to a point where you are seeing how things are, and it occurs to you that really things aren't moving as fast as they should be. And part of the problem might be other people, some other people, who are just in a state where they just don't want to move. They're quite happy where they are. And that's nice up to a point. I mean, there's nothing wrong with a bit of stability. But if people are refusing to move on, that means maybe that you are being held back. And, you know, as days can turn to weeks, can turn to months, can even turn to years. And if you see a situation where people are just holding on to the past, then at some point you are going to have to take action. And, you know, that action doesn't have to be radical or aggressive. It just is about saying, okay, these people, they're happy doing what they want to do. I don't approve of their approach, but I'm now going to move on. And yeah, you don't have to make a fuss about it. You can just move on. Well, unless, of course, you feel that you're dealing with people who are important to you and they're stuck in the past, then yeah, sure, you might have to give them a nudge. So, Aquarius, it does to a certain extent depend on the situation. But, you know, looking at your social life, all the people you know, I think, you know, with the moon making a square to Saturn, the moon in Sagittarius making a square to Saturn, making a square to Neptune, I do feel that there is a general sense of dissatisfaction, of just seeing the limits of other people. You know, there's just a limit to what they can do, for you. And, you know, just remember, it's really difficult for people to change. The leopard not being able to change its spots. That's true. That's real. People can say all sorts of stuff. They can make sincere promises that they're going to turn over a new leaf, and of course they never do. It's just impossible. I can make all the promises I say in the world. You know, Geminis can say all sorts of stuff, but you don't change. Fundamentally, people don't change. And I think that from your perspective today, I think that is particularly clear. And you do need to accept that. You know, especially now when we're in the run-up to the full moon. Now, the full moon doesn't really affect Aquarians directly. I mean, full moon affects different signs in different ways. I wouldn't have said that, all things being equal, Aquarius is particularly affected by this full moon, but still it may show you how stubborn some people actually are. And that stubbornness is just there. People are not going to change. They are, they are what they are. And so you need to accept that, and also accept that if you want things to happen, you are going to have to perhaps expand your horizons a bit, because where things are at the moment, right now, things are a little bit stuck. And I'm not saying that you should just rush ahead and do things right now, that you've got to somehow make things move, because it's going to be really difficult. You probably need to start preparing for a time of quiet contemplation. What are your plans for the weekend? I don't know what your plans are for the weekend, obviously, but it might actually be a good idea, Aquarius, if you don't have any plans for the weekend. So if today you get invitations relating to Saturday or Sunday, or you try to work out what should be done on Saturday and Sunday, maybe you should decline them. It's the full moon. Full moon is complicated. Things need to be worked through. And by having a quiet weekend, and by preparing for a quiet weekend, I think, Aquarius, that you would be doing yourself a favor. Pisces, you have a fair amount of power right now. In one sense, it's verbal power. You can really make your position clear. But it's also the power to just make things happen. And it's perhaps having an idea about the way you would like things to be, and then just pushing forward with it. You don't have to worry too much about technicalities and possibilities. It's always easy, I won't say easy, but it's tempting when you're considering taking an initiative to start to worry about that initiative, to consider all the things that could go wrong with that initiative. You don't want to upset people. There might be a roadblock. You haven't got all the time in the world. But yeah, it's always easy to worry about these things. But if you have a clear plan and a clear vision, then I think, Pisces, you can really make things happen. And I think that people will, in general, just get out of your way. Assuming these people don't like what you're doing, they're not going to, I think, really want to confront you. They're just going to want to have a quiet life. And at the same time, you may be helped by the fact that a lot of people don't understand you. Particularly now, they don't really understand what you're trying to do or what you're trying to achieve. They can guess, but they won't know. And normally that's a bad thing. We want clarity, don't we? But if people don't understand you, then you might actually be, or appear to be, dangerous. Who knows what you're going to do next? And in certain situations, that could be very much to your advantage. I'm thinking especially of, business, or where you're dealing with something relating to power, where it's a power relationship, or where you're trying to assert yourself in terms of, I don't know, I suppose it could be career, it could be business, whatever other projects you're involved with. But yeah, people don't really know what you're up to. People don't know why you're doing what you're doing, and as I said, normally it's a problem. But I do think that does give you an advantage. You are a confusing influence. Neptune is in Pisces. Neptune feels as if it's about to move into Aries, but it doesn't. You've still got Neptune in Pisces, I don't know, for well into next year. And so take advantage of it. And there may actually be an element of deception. a sort of a smokescreen. You know, when I was talking about Prince William, at the beginning of this video, I was mentioning the fact that he had Neptune in Pisces, and there was a bit of a smokescreen. Sorry, let me say it again. But he had Neptune in Sagittarius. Is that right? Yeah, but he had Neptune in Sagittarius rising, and so that allowed him to sort of create this smokescreen. And I was suggesting it might have been quite a negative thing, but I think for you, there's also a bit of a smokescreen, but I think in this case, I think it's to your advantage. You can hide your intentions. You can hide what you're doing. And so under the smoke, you can accomplish a great deal. And when the smoke has cleared, as it eventually will, you will see the full picture, and other people will see the full picture. In terms of relationships, I would be a little bit wary today. You don't want to get too close to anyone in particular, because some people can't be trusted. You know, these are particularly people you don't know well, but some people have their own agendas. I mean, you've got your own agenda, as I've just been talking about, but other people have their agendas, and you don't know what those agendas are either. So it's kind of mutual confusion. People don't know what you're up to. You don't know what they're up to either. And I think that some people are perhaps up to no good. Their intentions are not clear, and some of their intentions may be really quite unpleasant, but it might not be immediately obvious. So I must emphasize that I'm really talking about people you don't know well, people who have just appeared on the scene. Until you get further information, you cannot rely on them, and I don't think that you can trust them. Now, later in the day, perhaps into tomorrow, it kind of depends. There is a full moon. This full moon it's a time, Pisces, when some things do have to be revealed. Maybe there have been things that you have been keeping to yourself. You've been developing them in your own way, but I think over the next couple of days, maybe it's this evening, maybe it's just into this weekend, some things just have to be revealed. It may relate to people you know, your friends. Something needs to be said, because I've talked about confusion and smoke and mist, and it's a bit of confusion is a good thing, but there comes a point where it just comes too much, and I think over the weekend we're going to have to return to clarity again, and so your position has to be made clear. I'm not quite sure where your position has to be made clear. I think it's more likely in terms of people you know, friends. They've made assumptions perhaps about you, and maybe you have to make it clear that those assumptions are wrong. And those are my forecasts for the 12 signs. And now I want to look at things from the view of the I Ching. So I asked the question, what is Friday going to be like for those watching the I Ching segment of this video? And the first hexagram I got was number 4, youthful folly. Now, this is a problem hexagram. It's a hexagram that is often used by the I Ching to signal that it's a question that should not be asked. So, when you get number 4, youthful folly, the I Ching says something like, I told the fool once, I told the fool the second time, You're not listening. So in terms of whatever you're coming into this reading with, and the kind of questions that are on your mind, it's absolutely possible that you know the answer, but that you're just in denial, you haven't heard what you should have been hearing, and you don't really need to listen to what I'm saying because you already know the answer. And it's all a waste of time. You've just got to accept the truth for whatever it is. So that's one interpretation of it. But if we look at it just as another hexagram, then we would say with 4 youthful folly, we're in a situation where we are inexperienced, where we don't really know the answers. We perhaps just don't have the knowledge, and we may be floundering a bit. And it's just important that we accept the situation. Now, we do have moving lines here. The second line moves, and the third line moves, and also the fifth line moves. So with the second line moving, it seems to me that we're in a situation where we understand that we don't have all the answers. In fact, we may have none of the answers. And we are acutely aware of the fact that we have no power in the situation. Now, that might sound bad, but it's not, because we are being realistic. It's always worst when we don't know what we don't know. At least we know what we don't know. And that gives us some hope. And we are acutely aware of the responsibilities we have, but perhaps we're also aware of the fact that we don't have the ability or the power to execute these responsibilities. And we therefore have to be very cautious. And, we have the third line moving. And the third line is often quite an unfortunate line, and this can be about us really having no power and really starting to flounder, and we just have to be careful where we get help from. It's tempting to get help, but can we trust people to give us the help that we need? Moon is square Neptune. Moon is square Saturn today. So with Moon square Saturn, square Neptune, there's plenty of opportunities there for making mistakes. And Moon is also square the Saturn-Neptune midpoint. And so that all links with perhaps our feelings of powerlessness, that we just can't make things happen. But the fifth line moves. And the fifth line is usually quite a fortunate line. And here, the universe starts to smile on us. We have humility. The universe always likes it when people have humility. And we are quite open about our lack of knowledge and our lack of experience. And because of that openness, we actually start to get the help that we need. And yeah, we might not be able to do something, but maybe things are starting to move. And maybe indeed we start to work out what needs to be done. Maybe we've got an instruction book that didn't make sense, but we keep reading it, and finally the instructions make sense. And so things do start moving, and this hexagram, Youthful Folly, does move, and it switches to a different hexagram, and that hexagram is hexagram 53, which is development. In other words, progress. It's a very straightforward hexagram. So we get the idea of the day starting off in really quite a difficult note, because we just don't know what we're doing, and it takes us a long time to work out what needs to be done. There are false leads, perhaps people who could help us, but then we realize they can't help us, and we have to persist. And then finally, our humility is recognized, and the universe smiles on us, and things start to happen. Development. But it is slow development. It's not going to be any overnight solution, but we are starting to move in the right direction. So I think that the day starts possibly on quite a difficult note, but by the end of the day we are making slow, but I think very solid progress. And that's it with the I Ching. And now I'm afraid I'm going to have to consider William. As I said, I didn't really want to talk about William, but it is his birthday, so happy birthday to William. And let's see what is happening with William, what's going on in his chart. I suppose a recap of some of the things that I am thinking about when it comes to William. So here's what I mean about his Neptune. This Neptune in Sagittarius, it's on his ascendant. And, one just doesn't really know who the real William is. I do see that as being something as a smokescreen. We always see William in terms of his various roles. William as husband of Catherine, William as son of the king, William as future king, William as father, William as Aston Villa supporter. They're different roles, but really, who is actually there? And, he was born at the time of the summer solstice. If he'd been born, I don't know, an hour earlier or so, he would be a Gemini. But there's his Sun opposition Neptune. So I think, although that Sun opposition Neptune is quite wide, and it's dissociate, it's like, in other words, you'd expect a Neptune Sagittarius to be opposition Sun in Gemini, or Sun in Cancer to be opposition Neptune in Capricorn, but it's a dissociate opposition, but it is an angular opposition. And so he really is a Sun-Neptune person. Yesterday I was talking about Sun-Neptune squares. We just don't know who he is. And the chart is almost saying, to my mind, don't interpret me. I don't want to be interpreted. And what goes on in William's private world, I mean, who knows? Well, I suppose that's the supposed advantage of astrology. And what I do find interesting, as I said at the beginning of this video, is that William has no fire in his chart, unless you count Uranus and Neptune. Okay, he's got Sagittarius rising, but he's got no personal or social planets, Sun, Moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, not in fire signs. And as I said, people can have fire signs and be exciting, dynamic people. I suppose, like Boris, for example, Boris Johnson. Even if you don't like him, he's certainly a personality. But I think with William, I think it is a problem. And then he goes and marries a woman who likewise has no, God, I should have, where's Princess Catherine? So Princess Catherine, here's her chart. Here's Princess Catherine's chart for comparison. You see? Yeah, she's got a fiery ascendant, Leo, but Uranus, Neptune, Sagittarius, but Sun through to Saturn, nothing in fire signs. And, I'm thinking that's that is to an extent an issue somewhere. It's almost like you have a couple that just don't have the spark. They just do what is required. It's nice that they do things, that they have a busy schedule, and well, I suppose Catherine has been slowing down on her schedule, obviously, recently, but they are, I think, actually, in some ways, an unexciting couple. Yeah, they just go through the motions, they do stuff, it's like William going to a football match. It's very formulaic. That's his fire. I'm going to do something which shows that I'm an exciting, interesting person, but to what extent is it actually organic? And so I think that is an issue somewhere along the line. And he was born on a new moon. I suppose it's kind of a new beginning for him, isn't it? If you take Dane Rajah, the lunation cycle, the idea that life is a spiral as we go through perhaps different incarnations. If you're into incarnations, if you're a new moon person, you are at the beginning of a new set of incarnations on one coil of the spiral, and so the world is new for him. He's not familiar with it. He's still discovering things, and that is one way of looking at it. That his Venus, the Venus is just incredible, isn't it? That Venus conjunct Chiron. Venus is conjunct Algol, and Algol represents obviously the Medusa's head. His mother, Princess Diana, had Venus conjunct Algol. So Venus conjunct Algol says something about women in his life and the experience that women in his life have. Now, his mother, Princess Diana, had Venus conjunct Algol, and of course she died in an accident, that car accident in the tunnel, and so I think that that's kind of what he's attracting, and I think that this is the problem that Catherine had, in terms of marrying someone who had Venus conjunct Algol. So the moment she marries someone with Venus conjunct Algol, she becomes part of the Algol projection. Now, I don't know why she got cancer. It may have been genetic. It may have been stress. But it just wasn't helped by the fact that she married a man with Venus conjunct Algol, whose mother had already died in this tunnel, and also someone who is heir to the British throne. People who are heir to the British throne have very little control over their lives. They are just tools of they're instruments of the cosmos. And so Catherine, a free spirit, do what she likes, she's relatively unimportant, and then she marries William. And as soon as she marries William, she just becomes part of it. She becomes part of the cosmos. She loses her freedom, and potentially she becomes part of the Algol projection. So William's mother dies in an accident. Now she has got really, really sick with having cancer. I don't know how it's going. I hope it's being cured, but still, it really doesn't help. Now, that Venus in Taurus conjunct Chiron. Chiron is the wounded healer. Could be the wounded mother, the wounded wife, however you want to see it, and it's relevant right now. For a couple of reasons. And, I'm going to cut this short. I was going to look at William's solar return, but I'm not going to look at William's solar return. I want to look at two things. Firstly, his Venus is about to be hit by Mars and Uranus. Now, this Mars-Uranus, the exact Mars-Uranus conjunction is where has it gone? This is the Mars-Uranus conjunction, the one I've been talking about forever and ever, July the 15th, 2024. So there is that Mars-Uranus conjunction at 2619 Taurus on July the 15th. So there's Prince William's chart. That Mars-Uranus conjunction on July the 15th is pretty close to his Venus. And so in the run-up to July the 15th, he's going to have Uranus on his Venus, and he's going to have Mars on his Venus. Now, the precise date, I should have checked that, but 2519, he's going to have Uranus exactly on his Venus at, looks like June the 29th. And then on July the... then Mars is going to be on it on about July the 14th. So Uranus is right on his Venus. And next month, Mars is going to be on his Venus. So really that Mars-Uranus is absolutely on his Venus. And I think it's going to be very difficult. And I think it could have an impact on Catherine. I mean, I'm not quite sure how. I think that there's been perhaps some evidence, with her appearance at the the Trooping of Colour. Some people were suggesting it, was a lot of stress for her. I mean, I know she had this, her first public appearance. She was sort of looking, she was keeping a brave face on it, going through the motions. Perhaps not very spontaneous. Remember, this is a couple that don't have any fire in their chart, unless you count Uranus and Neptune. But it's pressure. And so this Uranus-Neptune could affect her. And I think there's further reason to think that it might affect her if we look at William's solar arc directions. So remember, solar arc directions, he's just turned 42. So we take every planet in his chart, we move it 42 degrees. To see where his solar arc directions are for right now. And we compare it with the natal chart. So for William, he has got his solar arc directed Saturn is at 20. This is for today. I mean, solar arc directions are relatively slow. So it's not going to change much from one day to the other. But his solar arc directed Saturn is at 2535 Scorpio. And his natal Venus is at 2540 Taurus. So that means that his solar arc directed Saturn is almost exactly opposition his natal Venus. So what you need to do in astrology is look for confirmation. So it's not enough to say, he's got Uranus conjunct his Venus or Mars conjunct his Venus. Do we see it somewhere else? And yes, we do see it somewhere else. So the fact that he's got Saturn, solar arc Saturn opposition his Venus at a time when Uranus is conjunct his Venus really does suggest to me that that Venus and everything it is symbolized is under pressure. And the first impulse is to think that this may affect Catherine in some way. Now, I'm not suggesting anything super dramatic. It may be working on a psychological level. It may be working on the level of her relationship, his relationship to her, but his Venus is getting really badly hit. And I think this is a time when he really needs to address his Venus and what it is and how he's behaving. Because I just sense that something is not entirely right. And also, in terms of William's chart, You know, he has got a new moon. And so he is going to be sensitive to the lunation cycle. And just after his birthday, on the 22nd, or on the 21st, actually, if you're in the Americas, there is a new moon. So if you've got a new moon fairly close to your birthday, okay, his solar return, okay, I didn't really want to look at his solar return, but I'm just going to look at his solar return anyway. His solar, sorry, did I say, yeah, he's got a new moon. Now, there's his solar return. I didn't really want to look at his solar return in great detail, but you can see at his solar return there is a build-up. This is for 2024. There is a build-up to the full moon. Because there's a, did I say new moon? There's a full moon. Let me get this right. There's a full moon today, or could be tomorrow. I think I might have said it was a new moon, but it's a full moon coming up. And this full moon, okay, it's not exact at the time of his solar return on the 24th, but still, the day after his birthday, there is a full moon. And this full moon, if we look at the full moon, the chart of the full moon, where's it gone? If we look at the chart of the full moon is at 1 degree 7 Cancer. So you compare that with Prince William's sun. You know, it's pretty close to his sun. So the fact that he's got a full moon on his sun, I think that all adds up. I think this has to be a potentially problematic time for him. I think the next few months could be really difficult, and I do think that Uranus on his Uranus on his Venus, remember he's got Venus on Algol, is really something that he needs to focus on. I don't know, there's just something wrong here, I think. But we're not going to know what it is, are we? You know, he's got Neptune in Neptune rising, so there it goes back to that smokescreen. We just don't know who is the real William. And I think you can see why I didn't really want to talk about William today. I just didn't feel that I could say anything useful, but it is his birthday. So I did feel I had to say something. Now, continuing with the full moon, and regardless of William, let's just look at the full moon in general. So here's the full moon, set for June the 22nd, 2024. I've set this chart. This full moon is actually set for Westminster, and so Westminster, London, obviously the government district of London. Now, I'll talk about the world in general a bit later, but firstly, what is it? What is this full moon about for the world, for us in general? This full moon it's not an eclipse. I would not have said that this full moon is particularly powerful, though it is square Neptune. So there is the full moon, 1 degree 8 Capricorn, and it's square Neptune. So it is a time of confusion and subterfuge. There's a lot of deception flying around with this full moon, a lot of lies. But maybe with this full moon, certain lies are starting to come to the surface. So that's one point about this full moon. The second point about this full moon relates to its midpoint. So if you've got a full moon or a new moon, and you're trying to work out what it's all about, it's always a good idea to look at what midpoints the sun and the moon are on. And there are two midpoints that I am particularly interested in. So let me show you these midpoints. So I hope you can read this by now. So there's the midpoint tree for the sun and the moon, and you can see that both the sun and the moon are on the Saturn Hades midpoint and the Saturn node midpoint. We can discard the other two midpoints. So Saturn Hades, Saturn node. That's not great. The Saturn node midpoint is about separations and departures, and in general this full moon is about endings. It's perhaps about maybe about saying goodbye to people. It's about relations with other people coming to an end. And then we've got the new moon, the full moon on the Saturn Hades midpoint. And Saturn Hades is about relations with people who are up to no good, relations with people that just don't work out well. Let me just read you what Vita says about the Saturn Hades principle. Melancholy, trouble, sadness, refugees. Now, refugees, full moon on the Saturn Hades midpoint, that's perhaps a reminder that, this refugees is a major issue in many parts of the world, certainly in America and in Europe. Refugees, asylum seekers, migrants. If we take that refugees issue, I know it's an issue anyway, but I think this full moon could make it even more of an issue, remembering that we've got elections coming up in the UK and in France, and refugees are going to be an issue. Saturn Hades, serious obstacles, enemies, loss, prison, restrictions, ugly habits. So that's Vita's view on the Saturn Hades midpoint, but it's on the Saturn node midpoint, it's on the Saturn Hades midpoint. So overall, I don't think that this full moon is a bundle of laughs. I think it's rather a grim and confusing midpoint, and I think that people are going to be they're going to be distinguishing, which people do we trust, which people don't we trust, which people don't we like. Relationships are going to be under pressure, not necessarily on a personal level, but sort of on a collective level. I don't think that people are going to have a happy view of the world, and there is just a certain sense of grimness here with this full moon. Now, this full moon, this chart here is set for London, and in a way, this full moon is a tale of two cities. And so let me explain what I mean by a tale of two cities, and let me just do the astro map. And I'm thinking particularly about that Mars on the ascendant. So let's have a look at that Mars line. So I'm not going to look at the whole world. I just want to look at Europe. And to follow that Mars line in Europe. There you go. So you see this yellow line. This yellow line is all the places in Europe where Mars, and okay, you can follow it through down to Africa, where Mars is exactly on the ascendant. So we can see that this goes right through Britain, and it goes right through London. And so set for London, Mars is exactly on the ascendant. But if we follow it through, Paris is also, Mars is exactly on the ascendant. So this line links London and Paris. So London and Paris are having two very similar experiences. And it's interesting that this full moon precedes elections in both countries. And it's Mars rising. So I think that this full moon hits the UK and France really hard, and it's just really interesting that these elections are coming up. And I'm going to look at these elections in more detail, but I would suggest that with this full moon, that these elections are not going to solve anything. And with Mars rising, the impact of these elections is just going to make things more and more difficult. And of course, as we've got this new moon, this full moon on the Saturn Hades midpoint, refugees is an issue, so that's going to be part of a problem. So things are really hotting up, and as I've said, I think it's going to be a long, hot summer, and this full moon is going to really encourage things to move from bad to worse. Anyway, that's it. That's all I'm going to say about the full moon. Sorry to be a little bit negative, but I'm just telling it as I see it. I do nonetheless hope that you found this video interesting. If you did find the video interesting, I would be grateful if you were to like it. And if you're not subscribed, I'd be super grateful if you were to subscribe. And if you want to buy me a coffee, there is a link in the description. So thank you very much for listening, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.